All right. Happy Aloha Friday, Finance Friday. Welcome to the South Florida Mortgage Report. I'm your hat dude wearing mortgage guy, Billy May. I got kind of my Aloha Friday hat on and always joined with my partner, Craig A. Garcia, president of Capital Partners Mortgage. And we've got a special guest this morning. This guy, in my opinion, is like a South Florida real estate legend. And I don't want to talk him up too much, but he's a hoot. He's a great guy. And I'll kind of tell you a little bit about him. His name is Hap Pomerantz. Hap has been selling real estate for 45 years in South Florida. He has closed over 3,200 transactions, which is huge. And on top of that, he's been with the same company, Kai's Real Estate, since 1980. And like Craig and I, he's a native Floridian and he's a Seminole like Craig. I'm not a Seminole.
Yay.
I'm an owl, but my daughters are Seminoles. Therefore, I'm a Seminole dad. But Hap, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. I know your time is very, very valuable, and you're going to give some great insight. So we love to have you.
Thanks for having me, guys. Pleasure.
Yeah. So Craig, I want you to kind of take over here. I know you got some things you want to ask Cap about and everything. So let's just kind of jump right in it. You know what I mean? So
Well,
fire
sure.
away.
It's funny, and I've known Hap as long as I've been doing the business down here in this area, and I think I didn't realize that it was 45 years. So that's you talk about seeing a lot, and that's probably a good place to start. I mean, you've been through, when you got started, we always talk about these stories about, well, back in the day, rates were, if you think this rate is high, you were in rates in the teens. You were selling real estate back then, so you've seen a lot. I mean, what was that like? I mean, what back in the '80s? I'm just kind of curious.
I was young and fresh out of school, and quite frankly, I really didn't know any better, other than what my manager at the time, the legend Ray Barquette, rest his soul. I started under Ray, and I had no idea about interest rates or real world, any of that. I just knew you got to get listings and you got to make sales. And the first thing that, I found myself in was a market where the interest rate was 17%. So I don't know any better, but the one thing I do know is my manager, Ray, telling me, now go get those listings and tell the owners they have to provide owner financing for 5 years until the rates come down. I didn't know what that meant, but I sure knew how to pitch it. So sure enough, I went out and I got a bunch of listings with owner financing. Of course, later did I realize, where we were at the historic height of interest rates at 17. And I think the takeaway was for the first 5 or 6 years of my career, we were praying for an interest rate that would go single digit.
Incredible.
So, yeah, that's the history. And the good news is buyers want to buy, sellers want to sell. You find a way. And, but yeah, that's how it started.
That's
Wow.
amazing. Yeah, that's real. That's real. People just, it's hard to wrap your head around that kind of an interest rate. So now, you fast forward all the way to today, and we've been through, and people are, it's funny, if you go online, there's no shortage of doom and gloom predictions about things. And, and so you've also, and we were together a little bit in the same office going through part of the, great financial crisis and what that market was like. People trying to make some comparisons. I don't really see the validity of that. But what's your sense of the market today, and people who are wondering, hey, am I about to buy and real estate prices are coming down? I mean, what's your overall sense of what's happening these days?
Great question, Greg. I've seen most every cycle over the years.
Yeah.
And if you stick to the basics, and the basics say, you want to buy a house, you want to sell a house, you deal with the environment you're in. I don't think comparisons to the past are necessarily valid either, other than to try to draw on your knowledge of what happens. My takeaway right now with what's happening is, we were spoiled for many, many years. And for those that have been in the business less than 10 years, they didn't know anything different than a 3 or 4% interest rate. And weren't even attuned or aware that if it did kick up to 7 or 8%, they could still make a deal. Things like buy downs and things like variable rate mortgages, you find a way to get the payment. It's all about the payment, getting the payment affordable. So I try to stick to the basics and remind people, now that interest rates have fallen, even in, what are we, in round sixes?
Yeah.
It's more than enough as far as the ability to buy a home and finance it if you're in the market. But I say to those that try to time the market, you never can really time the market. People have been trying forever. They want to time the bottom when the interest rates are at their lowest, or they want to try to time the pricing when the pricing's at its lowest. I think if you're comfortable with the deal and there's a way to make the payment affordable, I'm not so sure it would be a good thing to wait if you're ready to buy. Um, Also coming off the peak of the last couple of years, when now we've seen prices even go crazy. And now in our neck of the woods, I have to talk about Northwest Broward, is in our neck of the woods, the prices have steadied. They've come down slightly from the peak, but they're still, they're hanging in there. It's all about supply and demand. And, people want to live in South Florida. And we still got that going for us. So, interest rates are reasonable. Pricing has stabilized. I think I don't see prices dipping, greatly from here. So I think for any buyer that's in the market, to find the right financial tool that you guys can help them out with, to get that mortgage in place. And then you can, play the refi game, or even try to time the bottom if rates go down lower. But right now, if you can make it work with what you got, I see it as a great opportunity to buy. I think also sellers are more realistic, and the sellers that, really were holding out for peak prices, I've noticed over the last 30 days, 60 days, they've given up unless they really had to sell. A lot of the fodder that was on the market, a lot of those listings that were still priced high that weren't selling due to competition, those sellers, unless they had a real good reason, were not willing to do what they had to do to adjust the price to the market. I find now if a buyer wants to buy, most sellers, they're with us. Most sellers and buyers are, quite frankly, lagged behind the market a little bit. We know on the street what's happening probably 3, 4, 5 months before the public realizes it. I think we realized it a while back. The prices have tapered, and that interest rates are stabilizing. But now I think with all the media and enough of the positive media now, the buyers and sellers are realizing, hey, it's probably a good time. It's not going to get crazy one way or the other. And if you want to get in on the market and the home ownership and the long-term benefits of home ownership, it's a great time, and you guys can make it happen with all the tools you have, for mortgages.
Yeah, that's a great point, Hap. And that's one thing that Craig and I, we it seems like it's a consistent theme on Friday. We talk about, especially in South Florida. And I always make this argument, Hap, and you're the specialist of Northwest Broward County. I always make the argument. I mean, I live in Coral Springs, and 2 miles west of me, I've got the Everglades, and 8 miles east, I got the beach, and everything between is already built out. So there's no more land, really. And it's about the supply and demand. And the fact of the matter is, like you said, people want to live in South Florida, and Broward County, especially, we're kind of insulated. I mean, there's areas of southern Miami-Dade County that they're still building new construction. There's areas of western Palm Beach County that they're still building some new construction, but it's very competitive. People want to live in those markets, but especially Broward, in my opinion, there's like you said, it's got that nice kind of balance. It's a good time to buy, and you're the Northwest Broward specialist. I mean, Coral Springs. I mean, this has been your market, Hap, since you got into business, if I'm not mistaken. Correct? Did you start in Coral Springs, or did you start in Fort Lauderdale? Where'd you start?
Well, I started in Fort Lauderdale for a couple of years. However, I had started selling Coral Springs right away because that's where the new homes were. And the other thing, good point, Bill, about Broward, we're situated nicely physically. We're close to all the airports, and we're close to, shopping, the beach. We really are in the heart of it. And yeah, there's a finite amount of supply out there. So if you can, again, I don't see things getting crazy one way or another. And we still boast a super duper school system and a wonderful community. Stop that. Sorry, guys.
No, it's all good.
Working from home today. and the
Yeah,
dogs
most
don't
guys
know I'm
run around here
right.
too, so we're good.
But anyway, the and you got to realize also that we still have a wonderful school system. We have a great community for our neck of the woods. The western suburbs, they were planned. There's X amount of parks per square foot. There's X amount of churches and shopping, and deed restrictions have made the communities very desirable over time. And that holds. That's a great foundation. It's still a great place to live. And it's a great place for many people in the country and out of the country to want to come and settle here. And so it's steady as she goes, and got no problem with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
One of the things I've picked up too, Hap, and like I think I was saying, and in the sales calls I've heard you say is, you know, pricing the home right, setting the proper expectations with your sellers, when to say, hey, listen, we got to make a reduction. Kind of, if you will, kind of walk us through how you have that conversation with your sellers right now in this market.
Sure. I like to use a bunch of analogies. One analogy I like to use when I sit down, one of the very first things I go over with the seller is and a big challenge for us as realtors is really to get the seller to divorce themselves emotionally and mentally from the home. Typically, they've raised their family or lived or set roots on. And one of the points I try to make is I let them know, I said, listen, you want to sell your home? Great. Your home is now a commodity. It's not it's great to have those memories, but it's a commodity. It has value. And how do you determine that value? And then I like to use the IBM analogy. I tell the seller, listen, if you check, the stockbrokers follow the ticker tape all day long and the prices of stock. So if you wanted to buy some IBM stock, it's going to have a quote, and the quote is going to be at a certain number. Well, you can't sell it for more than the number that the market will trade at. And I try to get them to relate that example to the home, to say now your home has value. And unless you're really willing to sell it at whatever the market will bear, we've got to have that conversation. We've got to make it clear to the seller that you got to be in it to win it and willing to sell your home. Treat it like a commodity. I think that helps level the playing field. The other thing I like to tell them initially is that I never met a seller yet that said he bottom dollar, So you gotta get that out there, that you as a realtor, you want to get them the best price possible. That's why they hire you. You're only as good as the market. And I try to get in on a business level right away with the value of the home. And then we take it from there. So that initial conversation is real important. And then you got to back it up with the homework. And I find, I'm old school. I like to run the comps and bring, the physical listings with me, not only, to sit there with a computer, go online, show people, this one was nicer, this one wasn't nicer, but I like to do a deep dive. I don't like to show up with 3 value models from the internet and say, well, this one says this and this says this. I guess it's about here. The more detail you go into and the more deep dive you do on the sales and explaining the process to the seller that their home is worth what the others in the neighborhood have sold for, and then try to make those tangible comparisons and show sellers, I'm a visual kind of guy, and I try to do that with the sellers. And it's pretty tough for a seller, to look at that kind of evidence and that kind of homework and say, lies, all lies, They usually come around, and people are smart. Sellers are smart. It's the information age, but I think you got to try to gain their trust. Number one, let them know you'll try to get the best price, and then number two, do your homework so that you can establish the credibility. So that when you suggest a price or you suggest your marketing strategy, that you can drive the bus. From our end. And the seller doesn't drive the bus by letting I want to get X amount of dollars. And if we don't get it, well, that's not a seller as a realtor I may want to be working with, right? So I try to establish, the business end of it. I try to establish that the home has value. And then I do my homework and I involve the seller with the homework and lay out the plan.
And Hap, I have to say that, there was a number of years that we were working in the same office together. And this was back when the market was really a lot more challenging, right?
Yeah,
We
we
were
also
coming.
had a lot more hair, and mine was mine was brown.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was going to say I got a lot of gray now too. So,
I don't know about that.
but you definitely had a reputation, and at that time there were a lot of appraisal challenges. I mean, I think it was a very wonky market back then. I think that we're these days I don't think we're having that many of those, but I'm curious. But you definitely had the reputation in the office of, hey, if you have questions about some kind of an appraisal, Hap's the guy to talk to because Hap knows how the comps work. So it does speak to your method of, doing your homework, walking in there. I think that part is interesting that I didn't realize that, hey, you're walking in with physical pictures and evidence to kind of lay before somebody, which is certainly powerful, but you got to know, hey, here's the sales, here's how these sales are different from your property. Um, and that's really, knowing because that's now what are you seeing today in terms of appraisals? I mean, are you seeing challenges on deals that you've got with
Yeah,
appraisals versus, market? What do you think the market value is? What's
yeah,
going on
great
there?
question. Great question. Um, in a sliding market, for the market when we worked together in the same office, Craig, the market was increasing quickly, and the challenge was always that you were always setting a record with the next sale, and then the appraisal process didn't allow for that. They had to catch up, and appraisers were reluctant, to justify a value that they had not seen before. In this market, whether the market either be stable or sliding a little bit, in my opinion, I really haven't seen any challenges with appraisals because yesterday's sale is a tad bit higher than today's sale. Um, and unless you really, it's luck of the draw with the appraisers. Most appraisers are on board, and I'd like to believe they are fellow professionals, know what they're doing. Once in a while, you get a wildcat that may or may not have the experience and the knowledge, or for some reason may have an agenda, where you get a low appraisal. But in this market, I haven't heard of many people, or I haven't had a lot of problems, getting it to appraise because there's always good sales out there to base the value on. Okay.
So let me ask you a question as far when we think about that as well, Hap. I'm just curious. So when you're evaluating your offers, you have a few different offers. Do you look at who the lender is? Just kind of curious. Do you take that into consideration? How strong the offer is, how much they're putting down, et cetera, et cetera. Man, how do you review that with your sellers? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, you guys have the best questions. I think that's counseling 101 to any seller. You want to look at the totality of the offer, and it's may not necessarily always be about price. And yes, Bill, I take into account, how much, if something's highly leveraged, I'm a little more wary, do a little, perhaps a little deeper dive, or we just count, if you only have one offer, you counsel the seller that, hey, there might be more risk with considering this offer because of the high loan to value. Um, it also is important that if we see a lender like you guys and we know, you're on the deal, yeah, it's an automatic yes. That I have great faith in your outfit as a lender that I've worked with, and I know, that this deal is going to close, barring any catastrophic things that happen during the deal. But yes, you got to look at closing date. You got to look at contingencies. You could get a full price offer, but if it's contingent not just on them selling a property, but another person selling another property to buy the property that their buyers, but the dominoes, there's a lot of examples we can use to say there could be a lot of risk in the deal. And if there's a lot of risk in the deal, you got to look at the totality of the offer, and advise your seller accordingly. And while the market adjusts, usually there's not too many. I've seen a few, but not too many multiple offer situations where you have your choice. You got to play the cards you dealt, so to speak. But yes,
Sure.
it's important. And as you guys are well willing, that some realtors would like to see what a DU. I'll let you explain the process of a DU, as well as the pre-approval. And also, I think it helps to pick up the phone. Whenever you guys, I see a deal with your name up, Bill, I call you up. We have a 10-minute conversation, and I know we're good to go.
Yep.
I find it helpful to, don't just text, the old fashioned ways. Sometimes the old ways are better. Pick up the phone and have a conversation. Hi, what can you tell me, Mr. Lender, about the buyer? And many times, they want to make a sale too. You guys want to make a sale.
Sure.
So you want the opportunity to tell the realtor how good the buyer, is. Many times I'll pick up the phone and the lender will tell me, hey, they're already underwritten. We had another house and the house had termites and a bad roof. That's a big difference than, hey, I've met the buyer, I've had a phone call, and everything looks great. Those are the two ends of the spectrum, aren't they? And it's very important to communicate with the lenders. I'll give you guys props. Anybody that wants to work with you, pick up the phone. 10 minutes, that end of it will be solved. And as a realtor, I appreciate it's a team thing. It's an easy button. I got the easy button. I just press right here and you guys will handle the deal.
Yeah, Hap, I think it's a great point. I remember my first, several years in the business, I never had any offer that was accepted without me getting a call from the listing agent to say, just like you're saying, what can you tell me? And then it seemed to go away. You know what I mean? Like you got into the 20, 2000, we just didn't get those calls anymore. I still occasionally will get some calls from sharp agents who really, but you're really setting the tone for this transaction that everybody's getting into together. And I think it's and we talk about having our loan officers make that outbound call to the listing agent because you're this embarking on this 30 to 60-day journey, where all these people got to coordinate to pull this deal off. Yeah, you want to get off on the right foot and make sure you got, you know who the players are that are at least involved in the deal with you if you don't already know them. So
yeah, I think it's important to point out also, it's a minefield out there in the lending. Bad enough that real estate has its challenges with the insurance and the taxes and everything, all the outside factors that play with us. But your business, oh Lord, so many. It's a minefield out there, and unless they have somebody like you guys that know what they're doing, that you could have a very good deal go bad for the wrong reason. So it's important, to trust guys like you that have the experience to know the rules, and because the rules change every day. And I rely on you guys. I used to, in the old days, I tried to be a hot shot and not only know my business, but know the lending business and the underwriting guidelines. And I learned very quickly early in my career to trust my professional partners because it's a whole nother, landscape, and it's a whole nother set of rules. And, I rely on you guys to take care of that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Happen. Craig, you had mentioned you used the word about it's a journey. It's a 30 to 60-day time frame buying house and everything. And I'll tell you, I've closed deals with Hap over the years, even back in my home bank mortgage days in the 2000s. And I remember every time I do a deal, he'd be on the listing side. He actually is like, "Hey, welcome to the party." You create this kind of atmosphere, and you send out this really cool, very positive email, and you kind of set the standard for all the parties involved of what's going to occur. And it's like noteworthy. So anybody who's closed a deal with you knows that about you. And I have to ask you, Hap, you've been a successful realtor for all these years. And, what is it about you personally? Why do you win? And how have you lasted this long, over 45 years, and have become kind of such a, you're like the agent in Coral Springs listing agent. What makes you different?
When I figure that out, I'll let you know. I'll be doing my second deal next week. So, things are doing great. But all kidding aside, I think there's some common denominators to the top realtors in our business. I think one is, and most importantly in the long run, for longevity, one is the willingness to accept rejection and use it as a motivation, to move forward. If you're not willing to get those 9 no's for 1 yes, save yourself the aggravation. So I think that's a key. You got to be willing to deal with the rejection of the no's and know in the long run that the yes outweighs the 9, 10, 99 no's for one yes. However, you're working on your business or soliciting your business, you got to be able to deal with that rejection. Number two, you got to know your craft. You got to know your homework. You got to know how to price. You got to know how to market a listing. I got to give our company props. Kai's has the best training program out there, bar none. End of story. Over time and today. Realtors need to know their craft. Number three, I think is, they say salesmen are born. I do think, unless you're personable, people want to do business with somebody they like. And unless you're positive and likable, doesn't mean you have to be loud and a cheerleader, which is my style, but you could be very, very quiet and lead quietly, but you have to be likable and you have to be upbeat and positive in your message, with your client. I don't think anybody wants a realtor that's depressed, So I think that's another, common denominator. So I think those three alone. And then I think the final thing is you got to be tenacious. You got to be willing to outwork the competition. You got to be willing to go that little. This is the difference between, I think, good and great. Good realtors, they know their craft, they do the job, they can execute the transaction. I think, but the great realtors, there's only a small difference between good and great. And I think great is the ability to go that little extra mile, do that make that extra phone call to find out something that you could just answer with an I don't know, or go that extra mile to look up another sale that might not have been there the first time, trying to give you tangible, examples, um, or the patience, because I guess that's the final factor, is it doesn't happen overnight. So if the top realtors in our business have been willing to make a long-term commitment. I remember my mentor telling me, listen, kid, you may not even close a deal for a year. I hope you got some way to feed your face. But unless you're willing to make that long-term commitment, then I could tell you and my timeline's different than most realtors, but, back in the day, I don't think I got really cooking till about 5 or 6 years into the business. Um, I try to get insight from some of the newer realtors that I work with these days, and they tell me, yeah, it takes at least a year or two, even by today's standards, to establish. And you got to remember now, every day that I wake up, I've got 40 years of happy clients that could potentially want to use me. If I had only been in the business for a year and I only had done 6 or 7, 10 deals in my first year, I only have 10 chances for repeat business. So you got to be motivated by the fact that the longer you're in the business, the way better your odds get, if you do a good job, of course, and you earn your clients' loyalty. So that's a big deal as well. Hope I answered all of that.
Oh, yeah, it's a good point. I think it doesn't say, I think it used to say in your email tagline, "My hard work pays off for you," or something of that nature.
I found that one early. I got lucky.
Yeah.
But it's so true, and yeah, and I guess the underlying tone, I think this is a given, is it always has to be about the client. It can never be you. I try my hardest in my communications and both in emails, text, not to use the word I. I try to use the word we. I try to I even affectionately, I call my clients boss. You gotta, just like I want to be treated when I'm the client in another field. I want to feel like, the realtor has no other clients but me. I try to make that, somebody says, well, I know you're busy and I'm calling you. And my automatic reply is, I'm never too busy to talk to you, So there's a pearl if you want to share that one. But I always try to make it, don't get yourself, there may be ego in us all as salespeople, because I think you need some of that too. You got to have a little moxie, right? And be confident without being cocky. That's a good point. I didn't realize I made that point, but no matter how cocky or confident I am, I always try to make it about client, which is what I believe. And then here's well, kind of start the wrap up by telling you, I'll share a pearl with you. Uh, if you take care of the client, everything else will fall in place. Think about that. If you care about the commission or your deal, or you're selfish, I think in any way, you diminish your chances of success and repeat business. You know, we've seen some flashes in the pans over the years, filters that just come in and burn the market. And at the end of the game, cared about how many deals they made and not about the people they worked with. And I think the most successful realtors all share that. They make it about the client, and people are smart. They realize that when you've got that priority, and that's what gains loyalty.
I think
That's awesome.
your longevity is a testament to that philosophy. There's no way you can do this that long without putting the clients first and foremost. So that's awesome.
Especially down here, especially down
Yeah.
here. It's tough.
Yeah, seen a few.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
and Hap, are you still on a personal level? Are you still playing? Are you still in a band? Is that still a thing?
Yeah, I'm proud to say I played out for 35 years so far in rock and roll bands. Um, um, I can tell you this: carrying the equipment and practicing a whole bunch, takes its toll. But to that degree, thanks for asking. And yeah, I'm still involved with, always will be involved with music. Gotta be.
That's awesome.
Good deal.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. Well, hey, Hap, listen, thanks for your time this morning. I really, really appreciate it, and valuable information. I know we're going to get a lot of feedback on this for sure. And you've been great. And I learned some more things about you. And just hats off to you for just doing this, killing us for 45 years. That's crazy. I think I was in like 10th grade when you first started. Or no, I was like 10 years old.
Hey,
when you
thanks,
first
Phil.
started.
That's a happy note.
Yeah, but you're still killing it, man. I mean, come on, 45 years selling real estate in South Florida.
This is true. And I got to tell you, and you guys know too well, because you see me on the day to day. You know, my assistant Brooke she started with me out of high school, and she's been with me for 30 years now.
Wow.
And I got to give Brooke, all the credit in the world. It doesn't go without Brooke, without the two of us. So I appreciate her. I didn't really want to get there today because now it's going to cost me, but I gotta tell you, she is the best. And I realize
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm appreciative of her every day. And, I love you guys. You guys rock. Whoever's listening out there, if you're even thinking about a lender, just stop thinking and just give these guys the deal. You'll be happy.
You're very
All right.
kind. Yeah.
All right.
Cool
Awesome.
stuff.
Thanks a lot, Hap. Thanks for doing this. We appreciate your time. Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Just remember, guys, may the best days of your past be the worst days of your future.
Love
Good
it.
stuff.
All
Word
right,
of the
bud.
wise. Thank you, sir.
See ya.
Have
Take
a great
care.
weekend.